Hey guys, how you doing today? It's snowing. I can't even believe it. It's late April and it's snowing. I guess welcome to Canada, right? Oh well, it'll be gone by tomorrow. Uh, so what I want to talk about today is the liberal budget, right? And how it relates to something we call deficits, and how this actually manifests itself in a large-scale grift that the capitalist class plays against the working class, right? And it's something that we should be really, really aware of. It's something we should be talking about all of the time, right? So when you see a panel of people, right, on like CBC or CTV or Global or any of the news stations, right, they'll have a panel of people. There'll be four people. And one of them will always be like, we need to be deeply concerned about the deficit and we'll have to pay that back. Future generations kick the can down the road, right? Like these buzz phrases that they use that we all just kind of bob ahead and be like, yes, debt, debt, yep. The deficit is a debt that must be paid back, and we are aware of this, right? Um, so, no, no. The deficit, like, the government is not a business. It is not a household. The deficit is not a debt, right? It's not a debt that we accrue that we have to turn around and pay back. A deficit is a measurement of the surplus that is created in the society by the government, right? So if the government creates a $1 billion deficit by creating some kind of institution, like let's say a healthcare system, right? Um, that's not a debt that needs to be turned around and paid back, right? It's taking money and it's putting it into this institution of healthcare, which funnels it through doctors and nurses and even construction workers who build it, orderlies, all of these people, right? And then that system is maintained through the circular system of taxation, right? Uh, and if you, so when a conservative stands up and says we need to get rid of the deficit, what they're really saying is that we need to get rid of this government spending and take these institutions and privatize them, right? That's what they're arguing for. They're saying that they're not saying, well, they are saying that it's a debt that needs to be paid back, which is ludicrous. No, it's not. But what the effect is that the institutions that the government is currently funding should actually be funded by privatized for-profit industry, right? That's what that's what the conservatives are attempting to do. And the liberals are fairly aware of this, right? Because remember, the liberals and the conservatives are allies. They work together along economic lines. The liberals and conservatives are happy to have disagreements on cultural issues, right? Race, gender, women's rights, right? Abortion, these sorts of things. But when it comes to economics, when it comes to capitalist structures, they are in lockstep with one another. They agree completely, right? That the wealthy should stay wealthy and the poor should stay poor, and they agree with one another basically across the board. So when the liberals release a budget that, oh, huge deficit spending, right? That's what we're all hearing. Huge deficit spending, right? But what's actually in the budget? And when you actually look at the budget, it's just a scatter shot, right? It's just a confetti shot, right? It's like a desperate attempt by the liberals to appease anyone they possibly can, right? And to I mean, this has to help someone, right? We're spending so much money, it has to help someone. Of course, it has no structural analysis. The big celebratory, the big thing that everyone's trying to really hit on is the increase of funding for childcare. The liberals are finally moving on childcare. You get $10 a day, which, I mean, $300 a month, right? Not nothing. Not nothing. And I mean, I'd take it. I'd take it if I had a kid, right? I am genuinely of the position that I think we would be better off just giving that money to the parents directly. Why are we insisting on putting this means test of, oh, well, it has to be used for childcare? Give the money directly to the parent, and then if they want to use it for childcare, they can. But of course, the whole idea of having a childcare system is that you want to make sure that those parents are going to work for capitalists. That's the whole point of that. And so so what follows is it what follows is the liberal conservative alliance grift against the populace. Okay, if you're one of these people who dump out of these videos around now, thanks for coming. Leave a like, leave a share, leave a subscription. If you'd like to send me $1, I could use $1. My Patreon is down below. If you want to support this kind of talk, if you want to support leftists, right, now's a great opportunity to do it. Thanks for coming. So, the liberal conservative alliance and the grift that they're playing is that the liberals, like, and they do this all the time, they shoot a confetti cannon of spending at the public, right? With these little tiny piecemeal reforms, like, all over the place. And the public is left with this sense of like, oh, well, they're trying to help something, they're trying to do something, right? But all that kind of spending is just, well, it's gonna be spent and then it's gonna funnel up where? To the capitalist class, where they'll take it and they'll jam it in their offshore accounts, okay? But you've still created a large deficit, right? Which isn't actually that big a problem if you are spending it on things that are useful, right? Like if you're spending it on if you have an institution like your healthcare system, right? That's a great institution to maintain. But the liberals, they don't create institutions. They're not creating institutions, just scattershot shooting it into the atmosphere, raising this enormous deficit. And then it might not actually have like a profound effect on the society, right? And it won't, because you'll still wake up, still go to work for people you don't know, right? Still live this kind of half-life of misery that we all live under capitalism. And then the populace gets exhausted with this. They get tired of it because they realize this isn't changing my life. My life hasn't gotten any better, right? And so they start to abandon the liberals and start to gravitate towards the conservatives, right? Because the conservatives are saying this deficit is out of control and we have to pay this debt down, which hits people in the like personal responsibility chest of like, yeah, we need to take personal responsibility for the debt that clearly we're being told that it's a debt that must be paid back when it isn't, right? That the conservatives are just interested in privatizing what the public sector is spending money on, right? And when the conservatives privatize things, they don't ramshot like confetti spray. So, right? They want to privatize an institution, like a long-term care home, right? They want to privatize places that they can then sit on the board of directors of and funnel in passive income, typically by creating your misery. But the liberals are aware of this, right? If the liberals saw this practice and thought that it was abhorrent, as it is, right, they would nationalize. They would say, no, these private institutions, these sorts of things, what you're doing is incorrect and needs to go. But the liberals aren't building institutions, right? So they're creating a deficit by scattershotting into the society, all of which generally funnels up to the capitalist class in the first place, but it does create a deficit. And then the conservatives come along and say, oh, well, we're going to lower that deficit by privatizing a healthcare system, by privatizing something that the public actually needs, by privatizing a transit system, let's say, right? And that does lower the deficit. It does lower the deficit, but we don't need to lower the deficit because all the deficit actually is a measure of the spending that the government is doing. And it's typically good when the government spends things on institutions, on things that we actually use, like libraries, schools, right? Police services, fire services, right? It's typically good when the government does this kind of spending. And when you, because the private sector doesn't provide those services to the public. Or when the private sector does provide those services, they're very distorted and twisted and full of all kinds of crazy nonsense that you have to abide by. And so this is the liberal conservative alliance. This is the liberal conservative grift, where the liberals raise deficit spending by just scattershotting nonsense and not bothering to build an actual institution, right? Which allows the conservatives to come along and under the guise of reducing the debt, which is not debt because it's not a business or a household, right? It's spending done by the government, and the deficit is just a measure of the surplus that they're creating in the society. But under the guise of reducing this debt, this deficit, they privatize major institutions that the government has been funding, and they privatize it and keep it for themselves so that they can create passive income, increasing the misery of you and your family. That's the grift. And it's the grift that the liberals and the conservatives have been running on the populace for a long time, right? A long time. Attempting to convince the populace that the deficit is something that we should be scared of. And frankly, I take a look at the liberal budget, and I think to myself, like, there's nothing here that is, like, reformist in any kind of major way, right? We are still going to be selling ourselves to billionaires who we never meet and who don't care about us at all. It's not going to actually recover the economy, right? Or it's not going to create an economy that's considered reasonable or rational. It's certainly not going to do like a post-COVID economy. If anything, it's this pale attempt to try and breathe life into a system that doesn't actually work anymore, right? That they're shooting a confetti cannon into old systems of capital, right, that don't actually function anymore, and they're just sort of hoping that if they try to breathe life into all sections of the economy, into all sections of the body of this corpse that's shambling around, right, that somehow it'll create a pathway, and the money will start to flow down one vein of the economy, and it'll actually start to resuscitate, when what the liberals need to be doing right now is building new institutions, is building new highways, building new ways to circulate capital into the society so that people actually have access to the market, right? Things like a basic income, things like allowing workers to have control of the businesses that currently are owned by groups of people who they don't meet and don't do any work and they don't know anything about, right? Like, I had a conversation today with somebody, and I was talking about David Thompson. David Thompson's the richest man in Canada, right? He's the 3rd Baron of Fleet. That's his official title. He has monarch money. He literally was born a billionaire, and no one knows who this guy is, right? He's just a nobody as far as anybody's concerned, when he's the most important person in Canada. Like, he has the most money, he has the largest impact on our economy. If he shifts his money around, people pay attention. The people who have money. But we are kept separate and ignorant of that on purpose. We don't talk about these people on purpose, right? Because if we actually sat down and had a conversation about who has the power, who has the wealth, who has the money, and what's the system that we actually look like, we would reform it, at least. And so instead of the liberals building some kind of institution, doing any kind of structural change, they're just trying to shoot as much capital as they can into as many venues as they possibly can, in order to try to breathe life into this shambling corpse that's falling apart in front of them, while simultaneously setting up their conservative allies to then privatize large sections of the economy that actually works when they get into power. Under those circumstances, guys, like, you're doing wonderfully. Please like, please share, please subscribe, please donate. I could use direct support. We could all use direct support. Something like a basic income would be direct support. We could all use it these days. And you're doing wonderfully. I know you are. The world is collapsing around you. And they spend billions of dollars trying to convince you you're a failure, while telling you, no, we can't afford food and shelter for you. We can afford to gaslight you, but we can't afford to pay for your subsistence. Under those circumstances, you're doing great. You're making good decisions. Good luck. You're gonna need it.